Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Sonova and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Former Ukrainian minister arrested while attempting to leave the country. Iran says it's ready to compromise on nuclear deal ahead of talks with the US on Tuesday in Geneva. And Board of Peace to unveil $5 billion in Gaza reconstruction at inaugural meeting. Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau says it has arrested former Energy Minister German Galushchenko as he attempted to cross the country's border. The organization says the arrest was carried out as part of the so-called Midas case. While the agency did not name him directly, Galushchenko resigned in November following a major corruption scandal in the energy sector. Prosecutors claim he helped manage illicit financial flows to an alleged $100 million money laundering scheme. He previously said he would defend himself against the accusations. Ukrainian, Russian and American delegations are due to meet in Geneva on Tuesday and Wednesday. Talks come as U.S. President Donald Trump seeks to push through a deal to end Europe's biggest war since 1945.
The United States, Ukraine and Russia are set to meet in Geneva on Tuesday for talks aimed at ending Russia's war in Ukraine. The two-day discussions follow two earlier rounds of trilateral talks held in Abu Dhabi in January and at the start of this month. Envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner will represent the United States, while the Kremlin said aide Vladimir Medinsky will lead the Russian delegation. Medinsky, who headed Russia's team during previous negotiations in Turkey in 2022 and again last year, is returning to the role. It's a move that could indicate Moscow expects discussions to expand beyond security concerns to wider areas of dispute. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian delegation will be led by Rustem Umerov, head of the National Security and Defense Council. The announcement comes as President Volodymyr Zelensky expressed hope that US-brokered peace efforts would be serious and substantive, while warning that Ukraine was too often being asked to make concessions. He called on Ukraine's allies to take stronger action, including imposing additional sanctions on Russia and maintaining weapons supplies to ensure Moscow engages meaningfully in negotiations. Nearly 4 years into the conflict, and despite sustained efforts by US President Donald Trump to end what he has described as a senseless bloodbath, the two sides remain divided on key issues, including territorial control. Zelensky has rejected proposals involving the exchange of Ukrainian territory as part of any settlement, saying such a move would affect the livelihoods of around 200,000 people living in the areas concerned. The latest talks mark a continued diplomatic push to de-escalate Europe's deadliest conflict since the Second World War.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has met Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban. The visit follows talks in Slovakia focused on defense and energy cooperation.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has met Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban in Budapest as he begins the Hungarian leg of his Central Europe tour. Before leaving Washington last week, Rubio said Trump strongly supports Orban, who faces a tough election in April and is trailing in most opinion polls. Orban is regarded as one of Trump's closest partners in Europe and has become a reference point for parts of the American conservative movement, particularly on immigration and Christian values. Rubio later held talks with Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó, pledging closer cooperation with Central Europe as Washington looks to reinforce political and strategic ties in the region. Rubio arrived in Budapest after visiting Slovakia, where he met Prime Minister Robert Fico and President Peter Pellegrini in Bratislava, the first visit by a US Secretary of State in 7 years. Talks there focused on energy security, defense and NATO cooperation. Rubio stressed that Central Europe would play a bigger role in US engagement with the continent.
We want to work with Europe. We want to work with our allies. We want to work in cooperation with you. And our point has been and continues to be, the stronger you are, both on an individual basis in terms of countries and collectively as an alliance, the stronger the members of NATO are, the stronger NATO is. And under President Trump, this administration is going to make not just Slovakia, but Central Europe a key component of how we engage the continent and the world.
For Slovakia, cooperation with Washington centers on nuclear energy and defense. Fico said Bratislava wants US backing to build a new nuclear unit by 2040 and expand its fleet of American-made F-16 fighter jets.
The Kremlin on Monday strongly rejected accusations from 5 European countries that opposition leader Alexei Navalny was killed using a rare toxin from South American dart frogs. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov described the claims as biased and unfounded and said Moscow strongly rejects them. Britain, France, Germany, Sweden and the Netherlands said laboratory tests on Navalny's body confirmed the presence of poison. Navalny, a prominent critic of President Vladimir Putin, died in February 2024 while serving a prison sentence in the Arctic. Britain is stepping up its fight against harmful online content, with ministers promising a sweeping crackdown on tech firms and AI platforms. New proposals could also introduce a minimum age for social media.
The UK government has announced plans for a sweeping crackdown on tech companies, promising tougher rules to protect children from illegal and harmful online content. Downing Street says the measures will target what it called wild illegal content created by AI and could open the door to a mandatory minimum age for social media, similar to Australia's 16-year-old limit. Prime Minister Keir Starmer said tech companies would no longer be allowed to avoid responsibility. Ministers say they will close a legal loophole that has allowed AI chatbots to produce illegal material under the proposals. Chatbot providers would have to follow the same rules as social media platforms under the Online Safety Act, introduced in 2023. The government is also proposing Jules law, which would require social media companies to automatically preserve a child's data if they die. Officials say they will consult tech firms on further steps, including setting a minimum age for social media and restricting features such as infinite scrolling, which campaigners say can be addictive. Keir Starmer said the law must keep pace with technology and that Britain should lead on online safety. Australia became the first country to introduce a mandatory social media age limit in December, restricting access for under-16s. The UK has not confirmed whether it will adopt a similar limit, but the government says the option is under active consideration. Zeynep Farizadeh, News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
High-stakes diplomacy between the United States and Iran is entering a critical phase, with deep divisions still clear on both sides. Indirect talks are set for Tuesday in Geneva as military pressure and political demands add urgency to the negotiations.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi arrived in Geneva on Sunday for a second round of indirect talks with the United States, as both sides set out sharply different expectations for a possible deal. Araghchi is leading what Iran described as a diplomatic and specialized delegation. He is expected to meet Swiss and Omani foreign ministers and the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency. On the US side, President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff will lead the delegation, according to media reports. The meeting follows a first round held in Muscat, Oman, in early February. Both sides called it a good start, but no concrete breakthrough was announced. Ahead of the Geneva talks, Iranian officials signalled conditional openness but also firm positions. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Baghei stressed that as a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran has the right to use nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. Signals from Washington are mixed. US's Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Trump prefers diplomacy and a negotiated settlement.
We're dealing with radical Shia clerics. Okay? We're dealing with people who make geopolitical decisions on the basis of pure theology And it's a complicated thing. I mean, no one's ever been able to do a successful deal with Iran, but we're going to try. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner will be traveling. I think they're traveling right now to have important meetings, and we'll see how that turns out.
However, US media said Trump told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in December that he would back Israeli strikes on Iran's missile program if talks fail. Netanyahu has set strict conditions. He said any deal must remove nuclear material, halt uranium enrichment, and limit ballistic missiles. He also repeated his skepticism about reaching any agreement. Meanwhile, images released on Sunday showed the US Air Seal Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group sailing with aircraft flying in formation. 2 US officials told Reuters the military is preparing for the possibility of sustained, weeks-long operations against Iran if President Trump orders an attack.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met the head of the UN nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, in Geneva Monday, ahead of renewed nuclear talks with the United States. The meeting comes as US warships deploy to the Middle East, increasing tensions. Earlier this month, indirect talks between Iran and the United States were held in Oman, with Muscat acting as mediator. Araghchi said he wants a fair agreement but will not give in to pressure. Washington wants broader talks, including Iran's missile program, while Tehran says it will only discuss limits on its nuclear activities in return for sanctions relief, and rejects any demand for zero uranium enrichment. At least 11 Palestinians were killed on Sunday in Israeli strikes on Gaza. The Palestinian Red Crescent said a strike on a tent encampment in northern Gaza left at least 6 people dead, while a separate strike in the south of the Strip killed 5. The incident marks the latest reported breach of a U.S.-brokered ceasefire that took effect in October last year, with both Israel and Hamas accusing each other of near-daily violations. The Board of Peace created by U.S. President Donald Trump is due to meet this Thursday to discuss rebuilding Gaza. According to Trump, more than $5 billion has already been pledged for reconstruction and humanitarian efforts for the Strip.
Of America, Donald J. Trump.
Officials from more than 20 countries of the Board of Peace will come together in Washington, D.C. on Thursday for the first official meeting. Announcing on his own platform, Truth Social, President Donald Trump said that member states have pledged $5 billion towards humanitarian and reconstruction of war-torn Gaza. Trump also said that countries have already committed thousands of personnel to the International Stabilization Force and local police. He says that Hamas must uphold its commitment to full and immediate demilitarization, while regional Middle East powers including Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Saudi Arabia and Israel, as well as emerging nations such as Indonesia, have joined the board. Global powers and traditional Western US allies have been more cautious. However, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni announced on Sunday that Italy will join the board as an observer. The board is part of the Trump administration's plan to end the war between Israel and Hamas in the Strip. Both sides agreed to the plan last year, with a ceasefire officially taking effect in October. It was officially created and endorsed by the United Nations Security Council in November 2025 for a 2-year period. However, both Israel and Hamas have accused each other repeatedly of violating the ceasefire.
Lunar New Year, also known as the Spring Festival, falls on February 17th this year. Celebrated in China and by Chinese communities around the world, the holiday is associated with family gatherings. As hundreds of millions travel home for the holiday, this year's Spring Festival travel rush is once again breaking records.
Hundreds of millions of people crisscross China during Lunar New Year holidays each year to reunite with families in their hometowns, making it the world's largest annual human migration. Official estimates predict a staggering 9.5 billion inter-regional passenger trips over the 40-day period, which runs until March 13th. As with every year, the 2026 travel rush stands as a spectacle of logistics. Officials project that self-driving will remain the dominant mode of transport, accounting for roughly 80% of all trips. Meanwhile, rail and civil aviation are expected to reach historic peaks, with passenger trips hitting 540 million and 95 million respectively. China is also using AI technology to reduce crowd congestion and assist staff in preparation for the Spring Festival. As large crowds of passengers filled the station, police robots were deployed at Guangzhou South Railway Station, one of the peak times for travel in China. Preparations for the Lunar New Year are also stealing the spotlight in Indonesia and Malaysia. In Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, residents crowded the Glodok Pangkaran street market on Sunday as excitement built ahead of the upcoming Chinese New Year celebrations. Many people visited the market, one of the city's well-known shopping spots, to purchase traditional decorations, red lanterns, festive ornaments, and food items associated with the holiday. In Malaysia's capital, Kuala Lumpur, similar traditions are drawing attention. In Chinatown, colourful inflatable horse lantern puppets paraded through the streets, accompanied by the rhythmic sounds of drums and gongs, ushering in the Lunar New Year festivities.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss the Geneva peace talks on Ukraine and whether diplomacy can deliver progress or more delay. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. This week, all eyes turn to Geneva, where trilateral peace talks on Ukraine are set to begin on Tuesday, bringing together delegations from Ukraine, Russia, and the United States. The talks come amid growing pressure from Washington as Donald Trump pushes for a negotiated end to the most devastating war in Europe since World War II. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has cautiously welcomed the talks, but warns Kiev is being asked to more concessions too often, while accusing Moscow of stalling by reshuffling its negotiating team. As Ukraine calls for tougher sanctions on Russia and increased Western military support, questions are growing over Moscow's real strategy at the negotiating table and whether these talks can deliver substance rather than delay. To break this down, I'm joined now by Daniela Mello, a political scientist speaking to us from Boston in the United States. Daniela, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, Daniela, how significant are these Geneva talks compared to previous diplomatic efforts since the war began?
Well, they are significant because any sort of dialogue between warring parts is a significant step. Dialogue for dialogue's sake, of course, may not bring the desired outcomes for either one of the parts, but it is always more important to have them communicate than not. Having said that, this is the second round. There was a first round that happened several days ago in Abu Dhabi, out of which there was no real signs of progress. So the expectations are tempered going into Geneva. And as we could see this weekend at the Munich conference, it seems that Zelensky is, some might argue, rightfully frustrated that not sufficient pressure is being placed on the Russians to actually broker some sort of discussion in, let me put it this way, there's a clear sense that Russia is dragging its feet, that Russia is basically trying to appease the United States through participation in this dialogue, but doesn't have any real desire to settle the war at this particular or to at this particular juncture, or to accept any of the demands that the Ukrainians make. Russia basically wants to have all of its demands met, and it's not doesn't seem very willing to engage in honest dialogue. And Zelensky seems frustrated about this and has been pressuring the Europeans and certainly the Americans to apply more pressure points on the Russians than they have thus far, to see if there can be a break of some kind in the negotiations.
Daniela, Kiev also accuses Moscow of deliberately delaying progress by changing its lead negotiator. Is this a familiar Russian tactic in peace talks?
It has been, certainly, it has been a familiar. I mean, the Russians are very good at this process, at trying to save face with the Americans while at the same time ensuring that their interests are met and that they do not capitulate in any of their main demands. So it certainly looks like that. It is the interpretation of the Americans. It seems to be even the interpretation of Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Having said that, there's little that the Americans seem to be willing to do to compel Russia to actually move further. And Zelensky is stuck between a rock and a hard place because he is in many ways the victim who is being most pressured to, more pressure than the aggressor, in the sense to reach to be able to give up territory, for instance, and for the end of the war. So it's important that this be a just end to the conflict if it comes to an end, and that it's important that it comes to an end because both parts were able to negotiate an end. I mean, both parts may walk out of this having lost some of their concessions, and they should be prepared for something like that. The United States is also trying to pressure a timeline that may be workable if there's real dialogue in place, but there's also the impression and the reading that this deadline is serving the United States purposes. Why? Because a June deadline would be politically a win for President Trump in a year in which his party is going to face very serious contested elections, and he wants to bring that win to the table. So there's it's not just the Russians and their intentions and their strategies. It's how they're also playing the wishes of the Americans and the weaknesses of the Ukrainians to be able to drag their feet a bit more.
In your view, do you see Washington prioritizing speed over substance in its approach to ending the war?
That's certainly part of the concern. As I was saying, President Trump has a clear interest in ending this conflict and being able to claim that win in a year in which he is facing serious political pressures internally and wants to ensure that his party retains power over Congress. So an end to the war in Ukraine would certainly be touted on this side of the Atlantic as a major win for President Trump, and that is definitely one of his concerns. The other concern, however, is that President Trump is also somewhat distracted from Ukraine at the moment. As we know, he is engaged in conflicts here in the American neighborhood with Venezuela and increasingly with Cuba. And he's also engaged heavily in talks about Iran and Iran's nuclear program and trying to deter Iran from achieving a nuclear weapon. And he's had very high, whilst Secretary of State Rubio was in Munich, the president was having high-level meetings with the president of Israel, who once again came to the United States to try to pressure their position on the United States regarding Iran. So we have a president who is frankly not razor focused on the question of Ukraine. In fact, the question of Ukraine seems to have become secondary to the president, but he still wants a win. So it's hard to say to what extent the president will be able to shift away quickly from, say, the Middle East to Ukraine once again, when Ukraine seems to be relegated to second or third place at all times.
So what do you think? Could these talks deepen divisions among Ukraine's allies, or how far to pressure Russia or Ukraine itself?
So far, the allies, the European allies in particular, seem to be responding positively to Zelensky's requests and frustrations over their intended pressure. For instance, it was stated at the Munich conference that the Europeans expect that by January of next year, they will be completely independent from natural gas imports from Russia, which took a while for them to be able to break that dependency that had been created over many years. The situation in Russia the economic situation in Russia continues to deteriorate. The oversight over oil tankers going back and forth with Russian oil also seems to have been increased. So the Europeans seem to be sticking to their guns. They're sticking by the Ukrainians, and we do see signs of increased pressure. Of course, some are arguing, for instance, that the United States should utilize its power to influence China to come in and pressure the Russians in new ways. But it seems unclear how much of an honest broker China would also be in this type of situation, and whether it's worthwhile to truly bring China into the table as well. Having said that, I do think that the Chinese foreign minister at the Munich conference had a very interesting line. He said the Europeans need to be at the table, not at the menu when it comes to these negotiations. And certainly that reflects the feeling that the Europeans have as well, that these negotiations should include the Europeans at the table as well, because this is happening in European territory, and the Europeans are right now really shouldering the cost, the effort of the Ukrainian conflict. They are the ones bolstering Ukraine first and foremost.
So can you reply to this question just briefly? Are these Geneva talks a genuine step toward peace, or mainly a diplomatic pause in a long war?
It's a difficult question to answer, but what I'd say is that the hope is that it's a step forward. But the signals are that it's a delayed tactic, or that the Russians are using it primarily as a delayed tactic while they hope to regroup and gain more leverage over the Ukrainians, especially in a winter as harsh as this one, in which the Russians have targeted specifically the power plants that allow Ukrainians to stay warm and have electricity at home. So Ukraine is suffering. There's no doubt about that, and the Russians hope to take more advantages of that.
Daniela Melo, political scientist, joining us from Boston. Thank you very much for your insights and for being with us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Now, after the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region. Welcome back to News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Millions of Afghans are facing another year with urgent unfulfilled humanitarian needs, according to the United Nations. A new assessment from UN Habitat has highlighted the scale of the country's shelter crisis, while UNICEF has warned that nearly half the population required aid last year. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
The United Nations Human Settlements Programme, or UN Habitat, says 4.2 million people in Afghanistan are in urgent need of shelter and non-food items this year. The agency shared the figure on its official X account, stressing that adequate housing is the first step toward a stable future, and warning that action to address the crisis cannot be delayed. UN Habitat said proper shelter is essential for stability and called for swift intervention to support vulnerable families. The warning comes as humanitarian needs across the country remain widespread. In its 2025 annual report, the United Nations Children's Fund said 22.9 million people in Afghanistan, nearly half of the population, required humanitarian assistance, including around 12 million children. UNICEF identified climate shocks, economic recession and unemployment, as well as the continued exclusion of women and girls from education and much of the workforce as the main drivers of those needs. Aid agencies have repeatedly warned that declining international funding, combined with economic hardship and climate pressures, is leaving millions of Afghans without basic services, shelter, or food security. With winter conditions, large-scale returns from neighboring countries and continued funding gaps, humanitarian organizations say the need for shelter and essential support is likely to remain high in the months ahead. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Azerbaijan and Serbia have taken their partnership to a new level with energy cooperation at the heart of their growing alliance. The two leaders signaled long-term plans that could reshape regional power supply and strengthen their strategic ties. Here's more.
A few minutes ago here, presidents of Azerbaijan and Serbia delivered their remarks to the representatives of the press. Well, vital strategic partnership between these two countries have been underway for some considerable time, in fact for the past 13 years. And today marks an incredibly important milestone. The very first meeting of the Council of the Strategic Partnership between these two countries has taken place. We were there for the first few minutes of that very meeting. President Aliyev and President Vučić delivered their remarks, and there was a stage wherein the press representatives were not present. After that very meeting, a number of documents signed, in fact 7 documents related to economic cooperation, media, and also of course food security and many other areas related to that strategic core of the bilateral interaction between these two countries.
Serbian leader Vučić said the country is entering to the new era of electricity and it needs many energy sources. He added that the Serbian gas company and the state oil company of Azerbaijan held talks on this issue, and a cooperation agreement was signed.
The construction will take more than 2 years. We believe that we will open a gas-fired power plant by 2029. 3 sites have been selected around the city of Nice. We are talking about clean energy. The European Union also recognizes this. In short, the construction is expected to take place in Tripale, Krusti or Nishka Banja. However, I think Krusti is the most suitable place. The plant will have a power generation capacity of 500 megawatts. President Ilham Aliyev has promised me that he would personally deal with this issue. You may not believe it, but in 2 years they managed to create a total power generation capacity of 1,890 megawatts.
Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, in his turn, emphasized that the process of creating this power plant is based on the investment opportunities that exist in Serbia. Aliyev called the investment climate in Serbia positive.
Bir müddet bundan evvel biz Serbiya tabii gazın ihracatına başlamışız.
Some time ago, we started exporting natural gas to Serbia, and today we decided to increase the volume of our exports. Now, Serbia will also convert the gas to be exported into electricity, thereby acquiring clean electricity. This will create opportunities for both the Serbian market and for future exports. Today, Azerbaijan's export potential in the energy sector is 2 gigawatts. This figure will only increase because we are now engaged in the construction of many renewable energy plants and are ready to cooperate with Serbia in this area. We will generate an additional 8 gigawatts of energy capacity by 2032, and a large part of it will be exported. To achieve this, we need new and larger transmission capacities because our main export destination is Europe.
Azerbaijani leader marked that in general, bilateral relations with Serbia in the energy sector are now developing in a diversified manner.
At the Munich Security Conference, Georgia reaffirmed its commitment to strengthening the Middle Corridor as a key transit and economic link between Europe and Asia. Foreign Minister Maka Bochorishvili said the route is not just a transport network, but a secure and strategic economic bridge connecting regional markets. Our correspondent has more from Tbilisi.
Georgia is continuing to position itself as a transit and logistics link between Europe and Asia, with the Middle Corridor remaining central to its foreign and economic policy agenda. Foreign Minister Maka Pochorashvili reiterated this position during discussions held on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference, where regional connectivity and Eurasian security were addressed. According to the Georgian Foreign Ministry, Pochorashvili emphasized that the Middle Corridor should not be viewed only as a transportation route, but as a secure and efficient economic bridge linking markets across Europe and Asia. She highlighted Georgia's geographic location, open economic framework, and transit infrastructure as factors that strengthen the country's role within the corridor. The Middle Corridor connects Central Asia and China to Europe via the Caspian region and the South Caucasus, including Georgia and Azerbaijan. In recent years, the route has attracted greater attention amid geopolitical tensions affecting traditional trade channels. European partners and financial institutions increasingly consider it part of the broader efforts to diversify supply chains, enhance energy security, and reinforce regional resilience. The discussion also included Azerbaijani Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov and President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Odil Renaud Basso, underscoring the financial and regional coordination required for infrastructure development along the corridor. For the Georgian government, the Middle Corridor remains a recurring strategic focus across international engagements. Officials consistently frame connectivity, transit capacity, and cross-regional integration as long-term priorities tied to the economic growth and geopolitical relevance. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
Turkey has dispatched its deep-sea drill ship Chagri Bey to Somalia for its first overseas drilling mission, marking what Energy and Natural Resources Minister Alparslan Bayraktar described as a historic step in the country's offshore energy expansion. Speaking in Mersin, Bayraktar said Chagri Bey will reach Mogadishu within 45 days and begin drilling at the Kurad-1 well in April. The mission follows 2024 energy agreements with Somalia, covering onshore and offshore exploration, after Oruç Reis completed seismic surveys in 3 offshore blocks. With Chagri Bey and Yildirim, Turkey now operates 6 drill ships, and together with seismic vessels, Oruç Reis and Barbaros Hayrettin Pasha holds the world's 4th largest offshore exploration fleet. Bayraktar said Turkey has also signed exploration deals this year with ExxonMobil, Chevron and BP, with another partnership due next week. He reiterated a target of 500,000 barrels per day by 2028, rising to 1 million in the longer term. Turkey has stepped up high-level security and diplomatic engagement as regional tensions continue to shape the agenda. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met Iraq's defense minister in Ankara, while Turkey's intelligence chief held a series of meetings on the sidelines of the major security conference in Munich.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan on Sunday held closed-door talks in Ankara with Iraqi Defense Minister Thabit Abbasi, as Turkey and Iraq continue efforts to strengthen security coordination. Details of the meeting were not made public, but the talks took place against the backdrop of ongoing regional security concerns and cross-border challenges. Diplomatic engagement also continued in Europe. Iraqi Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein met the head of Turkey's National Intelligence Organization, Ibrahim Kalin, in Munich, where global leaders gathered over the weekend for a major security conference. According to Iraq's foreign ministry, Hussein and Kalin discussed ways of enhancing cooperation between their two countries and reviewed developments across the Middle East. Talks also focused on the latest situation pertaining to a fragile ceasefire agreement that was recently signed between the Syrian government and the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces. The Turkish intelligence chief also held a series of meetings with his foreign counterparts on the sidelines of the Munich conference. According to security sources, those discussions covered a wide range of bilateral and regional issues, including Iran, Gaza, Syria, and developments in North Africa. Talks also reportedly tackled joint counterterrorism efforts, irregular migration, and cybersecurity. Over the weekend, Germany hosted the 62nd Munich Security Conference, where diplomats from around the world described the current global climate as the most turbulent since the end of the Cold War. This is Adam Maro for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Kyrgyz President Sadir Japarov has dismissed the ministers of emergency situations, transport and communications, and natural resources, ecology and technical supervision. The reasons for the dismissals were not disclosed. This latest move follows a series of government changes earlier in February, including the resignation of the head of the National Security Committee and his deputies, and the Speaker of Kyrgyzstan's Supreme Council. Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan have agreed to strengthen coordination in managing shared water and energy resources, signing a trilateral protocol aimed at ensuring regional energy stability and sustainable use of transboundary rivers.
Energy ministers of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan discussed the current state and future prospects of cooperation in managing water and energy resources. The talks focused on ensuring the sustainable and balanced operation of the regional power system, particularly during periods of seasonal peak demand. The sides reviewed coordination of generating facilities, compliance with agreed water use parameters, and joint approach to maintaining stable water regimes in transboundary rivers. Ministers emphasized the importance of mutual support and prompt coordination during seasonal loads, noting that agreed water release schedules are essential for both irrigation and hydropower generation across the region. The issue is particularly pressing. According to the Euro-Asian Development Bank, Central Asia could face a significant water deficit by 2028-2029 if current consumption trends continue. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization data shows that Central Asia faces extremely high water stress, with more than 70% of its renewable fresh water withdrawn each year, mostly for irrigation, highlighting pressure on shared water resources. At the conclusion of the meeting, the parties signed a trilateral protocol formalizing the agreements reached, reaffirming their commitment to strengthening the reliability of Central Asia's integrated water energy systems amid climate and resource challenges. It is Sivil Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss a rare confidence-building meeting between Armenian and Azerbaijani civil society representatives and its implications for peace in the South Caucasus. See you shortly. Welcome back. A rare and symbolically important confidence-building step has taken place in the South Caucasus. On February 13th to 14th, Armenian and Azerbaijani civil society representatives met face-to-face in Armenia under the Peace Bridge initiative. Notably, the Azerbaijani delegation crossed into Armenia via a newly delimited and demarcated land border section, an unprecedented move reflecting the gradual normalization process following the August 2025 Washington summit. The talks focused on peace implementation, regional security, borders, connectivity, and the role of society in sustaining reconciliation. To discuss the significance of this development and what it means going forward, we're joined by Murad Muradov, Deputy Director of the Topçu Bashev Center, speaking to us from Baku. Murad, welcome to the program.
Hello, thank you so much.
Murad, how significant was this meeting compared to previous Armenian-Azerbaijani civil society dialogue efforts?
After two previous inaugural meetings of the Bridge of Peace Initiative, which featured like two small groups of 5 people, this one had a more ambitious, participant list with 20 people on each side, and also for the first time we crossed the border into Armenia, the land border. At the part of the 12-kilometer part between Kazakh region of Azerbaijan and Tavush region of Armenia, which was delimited in 2024. And of course, this symbolic step was also meant to show that the peace process is taking steam and gradually entering the new phase.
Murad, what message does this border crossing send to societies on both sides?
Well, any talk of comprehensive peace, of cooperation, of, let's say, normalization of interstate relations starts with very basic things, which is, of course, first of all, security. And security means, let's say, parents on both countries being feeling safe that their sons who pass their military service along the border will not become a casualty of an incident. This kind of incidents took thousands of lives, since the 90s. Even during the ceasefire years, they were happening incessantly. So the fact that, for the last 2 years, there has been no casualty on the border, and now citizens of Azerbaijan can freely cross into Armenia, it sends a beacon of hope for a much better future, and also, a tangible, indicator that the efforts taken by Azerbaijan for the last 2 years are giving fruit.
So discussions reference the peace agenda endorsed at the Washington summit. How realistic is its full implementation at this stage?
I would say that the conversations with both Armenian counterparts and Armenian officials, as I should notice, we also had a chance to meet the head of Security Council, Armen Grigoryan, and also Deputy Foreign Minister, Vahan Kostanian. So they've been very positive. I would say the amount of contradictions and some of challenging questions being raised was a little lower than we expected, honestly, and also it could have been assumed that the Armenian government right now is quite committed to implementing this agenda. Yes, of course, there's still a couple of obstacles. Yeah, of course, first of all, we're all waiting for the outcome of the elections in Armenia in June, and hopefully the political forces that support this agenda will prevail. And also the referendum, which is also scheduled at some point this year. So Azerbaijan, as you know, has been consistently expecting Armenia to implement the constitutional change in order to withdraw the last trace of national ambitions over parts of Azerbaijan. But I must say that this government shows, let's say, a lot of optimism. And the recent meeting in Abu Dhabi was also commented with a lot of endorsement and, let's say, warmth in the negotiation process with Azerbaijan has been described as unprecedented. So I think we should expect some better steps, some new achievements in the near future.
Murat, economic cooperation and connectivity were key topics at the roundtable. Which areas offered the most immediate and realistic gains?
Well, I must note that Armenian participants were highly appreciating the recent steps of Baku to kick off the transit and also export of oil products, and this has been viewed as a very positive gesture. In general, Armenian side is now very keen on accelerating the process of developing communications, and a lot of conversations spin around the fact that the trip should not be the only route, and also there is a lot of willingness, desire in Armenia to see other main roads being developed. For example, the one that we traveled from Gaza. Also, the talk about reconstructing 2 railway connections. First, between Yerevan in Armenia and Talarak in the Hichevan, which is actually just requires repair of some 3 kilometers of track in Armenia, which can take us a few months. There is a more ambitious also plan to reconstruct the piece of railroad to the northeast from Ijevan up to the border with Kazakh region again. This project will cost significantly more, and also will take more time. But Armenian side is ready to to listen to Azerbaijani proposals on this. And also, I mean, a lot is now being said about pipelines. For example, there is like a defunct old gas pipeline again from Kazakh, which was used in the Soviet times to bring gas to Armenia. And so, and there is also a suggestion that it may be a part of this upcoming economic normalization. Yeah, and of course, also Armenian side is open to exporting certain goods to Azerbaijan, and let's say right now the economy is trying to to give concrete proposals. I mean, which goods can be exported soon.
So Murad, public skepticism remains strong in both societies. How can initiatives like Peace Bridge address trust deficits?
I must say that yes, of course, there is significant skepticism, significant bitterness after the decades of conflict, and for many people, it remains hard to swallow. The fact that now people from Azerbaijan can travel to Armenia and vice versa. Also, yeah, of course, it's still all the trips are organized carefully with a lot of security measures, but still, yeah. But I must say that the amount of negativity has been decreasing, I think, month by month, and we've seen a lot of positive comments. So now, not only from Azerbaijan, but from Armenia too. And I hope that this kind of meetings, will help to spread the word. And as more and more, let's say, Armenian participants, experts, activists will be able, to, let's say, get more sure about Azerbaijan's intentions on peace, and then they will then spread this word in their society, in their communities. Hopefully, each new meeting will be greeted with more and more enthusiasm in both sides, and hopefully we will, let's say, reach the point when this process becomes self-supporting, and then we can be able to talk about the comprehensive peace.
And finally, looking ahead, what concrete next steps would you recommend to ensure this dialogue translates into lasting normalization?
I think the government's on the right track. Crucial thing is that there is, now certain trust to the governments, which was absent, even maybe a year ago. And this means that the commitments and the ideas discussed at the meetings then come to be implemented. For example, like this Bridge of Peace initiative is very strongly supported by most governments who really have made their best, for it to happen. And you see the outcomes on the ground. And I think we shouldn't, let's say, be too hasty, because of course, after decades of conflict, all issues related to direct communication of people should be treated with certain care. And as life shows, most of us are in the end we're open to peace, and it should be a natural process when we shouldn't expect for people to on both sides to forget about the difficult past and the, let's say, the tragic past. But on the other hand, we should build our future step by step, and create an environment where Azerbaijanis and Armenians will cherish peace over, old conflicts, rivalries, and injuries.
Murad Muradov, Deputy Director of the Topçu Bashov Center in Baku, thank you very much for talking to A News. We truly appreciate your time and perspective. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for more.